Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto Was Justice League's Fire Shadow. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. The Los Angeles. The busy streets of the place known to all as the City of Angels was so different from what one who was not a native was used to. And that applied to the disguised blonde who was currently walking the streets in a set of clothes that were the cane one associated with a regular teenager to an early adult who had his own sense of clothing style. Naruto wore a set of black denim pants, a white shirt and a green with black vest on. The only thing that would have been different about his appearance was his ever-present birthmarks on his face, as well as his now red hair, which was still spiky, but draped downwards. The blonde had managed to get his hands on washable red hair dye, and used that to color his hair. Naruto made sure to pick a color that would match his mother Kushina Uzumaki's own deep red hair, so it would be different. He had done so in order to avoid being seen in public, since if he had not done it, and left his hair in not only the natural shade and style, it would have attracted attention. He doubted that they would have recognized him as the Hokage from last night, but if there was one thing Naruto learned in his long life and career as a shinobi, there was always a need to be ready for anything. Besides, it gave him a chance to actually try and have the very same cool red hair of his mother. He recalled easily how he had loved his mother's hair when he had been able to speak to her for the first and last time in his mind, during his attempt to finally control the chakra of the Kyuubi long ago. Kushina smiled and loved that as well as loving him deeply, and that had been the key to him winning the fight, and she laughed at his words on how cool he would have looked with her hair color on instead of his father's. Now he looked the part, and that made him smile even more, and so far it seemed to be working as he moved through the city well enough, without having to resort to henge. Still, it amazed him to see the city of Los Angeles. It looked so different in the day compared to what he had in the night when he went out only yesterday. And this was the reason why he took the time to disguise himself and explore. He could have used henge once again to try and move about like last time, but he decided against it, since there were now alternatives that he could use, and thus he did not need to use his chakra. That was going to be used for other purposes, and as such more practical disguises were a must for something like this. In an internet cafe. Wow, this is different. Those were the words came from his mouth that easily described this place he was in right now. He had seen the very large number of people there in the building, and wondered what was this all about. He had managed to reach the inner areas of the city, and had seen a large number of people there, and him being the curious one that he was, decided to take a look and see what was going on. And the things he saw in there were impressive to say the very least, as he saw computers and more all over the place. It was not that Naruto had no idea about technology, far from it, as he was very familiar with a number of things here in this world. TV, refrigerators, radios, and even a few other devices such as water heaters, watches, toasters, and a few other things were just as common there in Konoha as it was here, and the other villages as well. But he had to admit that some of the things he had seen thus far were utterly new to him. These things called computers, video cameras, cell phones, iPads, MP4 players, printers, scanners, all of these were so unknown to him, and even though he had seen a number of these already, the cars, motorbikes, airplanes, buses, and more were utterly alien to him. None of these were seen as common to him in his mind back in Konoha. Even this internet was amazing. It was like all the world's news, and more were made into one very accessible source and location. And so far he could see that the technology in this world he was in was more than enough to make the technology back in Konoha, or at least some of it, look old and obsolete. As he continued to work on the computer that he had paid for with some of the money he had on himself, he began to explore the internet and the computer to find out what he could. The first thing he did was search if there was anything related to the layout of the city he was in. The night before, he had managed to explore most if not all of the city of Los Angeles, but he needed a map, and that way he would know just where to go and what to do. He turned to one of the staff and asked a few questions. "Excuse me." "Yes, sir." "How do you take this map from here and place it on paper?" The young attendant looked at Naruto with some level of confusion, as he thought that everyone already knew how to use computers, unaware that the red hat before him had no experience whatsoever with computer systems. After some time, the map was made for Naruto, and he in turn was given a short idea on how the internet could be used for anything. One such thing was something he knew that his godfather, the pervy sage Jiraiya, would have enjoyed immensely when he checked it out. Even he was impressed by what he was looking at as well, and couldn't help himself as he smirked somewhat. Man, I can bet the pervy sage would have loved this. Who knows what sort of ideas he would have gotten. As he placed that thought aside, he decided to see what else he could learn, but he knew that he was going to have to be rather careful about it. Using Kage Bunshin to learn stuff was one thing, but doing that in a place where such techniques could arouse trouble and too much scrutiny. And that was something that went against his training. It was possible to use Kage Bunshin and use henge on them, but that would be taking a good amount of chakra. And while his control was a load better than what it was before when he was younger, way younger that is, he was not too sure about the idea of unleashing 1,000 Kagebunshin, and then using Henge, since Henge still required him to see a person, and make an exact copy of said person. And naturally making a number of copies of other people was bound to get attention. This was why he was keeping his reading to himself, and while it was already beginning to stress him out a bit, he was not going to complain. Later. It took quite a while for him to get his work done, but at least he now had a map of the whole city, and would not have to waste too much time moving about. But that did not mean that he was going to have an easy time with the whole thing, as he went about to get his bearings. Having a map of the city with a bird's eye view is one thing, being on the ground, and looking for said location was something else as well. But he was not going to make too much of a fuss. He naturally marked the places where he could find food shops and restaurants, if he needed to grab a quick bite. He looked around to make sure that he was not going to stand out like a sore thumb, and he was happy that his disguise was working fine so far. He then decided to go and see any other sights that he might have missed. He also made sure to keep his eyes and ears open in case of trouble. He had some supplies hidden on him and sealing scrolls which he could open and use. This included special containers filled with water, so he could wash away the red hair color. The next were his ninja clothes, and naturally his weapons and equipment. Most people would have been shocked by the fact that he was a ninja, and he was wearing those kinds of clothes and in broad daylight, but considering where he came from, ninjas doing morning missions was not unheard of, and he had done a fairly large amount of those missions. He also decided to read up on what was the view of ninjas in this world, and what he learned was not exactly something that he had expected. When he discovered that they were not able to use chakra like he could not help but be surprised by that discovery. The way they used the ninjutsu that he was familiar with was both familiar yet odd as well, and the gear that they were known or suspected of using was both familiar and yet not at the very same time. Naruto also had to admit that some of the documentaries made about ninjas were partially right, and also those films were somewhat close. Still, he had yet to meet ninjas in the flesh, though Batman was the closest one to that description, as the man was no doubt trained well. So far this world's technology and what he had seen was something that he was still getting used to. But at the very least there were no shortages of things to do, places to see, and women to look at every now and then. So far however there was nothing going on that would force him to go into his ninja uniform, and for that he was thankful. Hours later. Man, what a day. Naruto silently said to himself as he entered what was a small diner. The smell of food that was unlike anything he had tried before was new and tempting to him. He had enough of his previous winnings to get himself a meal, which was something that was called scrambled eggs with bacon and toasted sourdough bread. The waiter smiled at him in a rather perky and friendly manner. "Is there anything else you want, mister?" Naruto looked at the rather nice-looking woman, and noted that she would have to be in her late teens, and seemed to be in a rather happy mood, no doubt hoping to finally take a day off from work now that the night was coming in. He smiled gently at her and replied in a respectful manner, as he had matured well enough to know when to give respect to others. "I'm alright, though I would like some juice if you have any." "Sure thing, we've got grape, apple, lemonade, lime, strawberry, and watermelon right now. Which would you want?" Naruto thought it over and replied after a moment or two. "I'll take the watermelon." "Sure thing there, give it a few minutes, okay?" The disguised blonde nodded as he went back to trying some of the food, and found that the food was not bad to him at all. It was actually rather nice and totally unlike any of the food that he was used to eating back in Konoha, though he had recalled trying something similar back in his traveling days. The sourdough bread was a new thing for him though, and he was eager to dig into the bread even more. The waitress came back with his drink, and Naruto found the drink to be rather nice. However, his danger senses kicked in just as another man wearing a jacket came into the place. Naruto kept his cool while keeping the man in his sights, trying to discern what the reason was that his senses were telling him to keep an eye on the guy. It was not long before he noted the way the man seemed to sometimes move his hands into his pockets, like he was either checking something or making sure to have his hand on said item. The guy also seemed to be looking around in a way that told the ninja that he had less than friendly intentions. Naruto's feelings were right on the money when the man moved towards one of the waitresses, and before anyone else would notice with the exception of him, the man took out a knife and grabbed the waitress. The scream of the waitress was enough to get everyone's attention as people screamed as the man now pressed the knife into the throat of the woman he now held hostage. "Alright. Shut the hell up." The owner of the diner moved out and saw what was happening. Naruto sensed that he had tried to reach for a weapon, but stopped when he saw that the man had a hostage. But he tried to speak and reason with the man. "Hey buddy, take it easy here. Screw you, old man. I want everything you have in that cashier of yours, right the hell now." The man then looked at the people including Naruto and spoke seriously. "And if any of you try calling the pigs here, then I got this woman right now and take one of you and do the same. You got me?" The frightened people nodded and so did Naruto, but he was hardly afraid. Compared to numerous foes he had fought back in his world, this guy was barely at any level. Heck, even an academy student would have been a lot more dangerous than him. But he did have a hostage, so no one could make a move, even though the former Hokage could tell that a few of the patrons were eager to try and stop him. Naruto knew he could easily take this guy, but using his ninja training was out of the question, since it would attract attention. He had to let others do the move, and to do that, he needed to give them an opening. And he already had a very good idea on how to do just that as he reached into his pocket slowly and took out a coin. The blonde did it quietly as the man began to herd some of the more terrified people away to the door, no doubt to block it with their own bodies, just in case someone came in. He in the meantime was still shouting expletives towards the owner to hurry up and give him cash. Naruto noted that the ones who he had seen were ready to make a move were looking intently at the man and not at him. But now we make the opening, hope to Kami this works. Naruto was carefully moving out of the way as he studied the one who was trying to rob the diner he was in. He knew that he needed to get into an angle, and that would then allow him to attack. Thankfully his ninja training had paid off as he had made sure to improve himself during those years back in Konoha, and he was soon able to get to the angle that he needed. The guy had his hostage and was focused on the waitress and the others, but had not noticed the disguised blonde, as Naruto got a small coin, and waited a bit more until the man turned. He focused some of his chakra into the coin, and once he was sure that he had coated the coin well enough with his chakra, he made a quick and sharp toss, and sent the coin right at the man's arm. Namely at a nerve area that would cause not only pain, but if hit hard enough force the man to drop his weapon, and hopefully that would allow him or the other patrons to try and take down the man without risk to themselves in the very same moment. The chakra made the coin heavier and thicker, but not enough to cut through the skin, but naturally would impart enough force to hit the nerve that Naruto was aiming for. The attack from the blonde was more than enough as the man shouted out loudly as a sharp pain snaked through his arm. Ugh. The attack made the man drop the knife he held, and that was the moment some of the other patrons needed, as one of the larger ones got up and attacked with a football-style tackle that sent the man to the ground. The pain of both attackers and the surprise of it all was enough to make the man loosen his grip on the waitress, as another man came in to help the one who tackled the robber by kicking the knife away. The owner came in and brandished a handgun, and forced the man to stop struggling at the sight of the firearm. Call 911. Later. Man, that was a heck of a first night. Naruto arrived at his apartment and took off his mask, coat, and vest once he was in the room. He made his way to the living room and placed his swords on the small table that he had with him in the room, and sat down on the nearby chair. He groaned a bit and felt his body begin to relax after a very long night on patrol, as it were. After the episode with the hostage-taking thief at the diner, Naruto was able to evade the cops and disappear. Something that was good at now and had a lot of experience doing, since a vast portion of the people were still in shock and dealing with the thief. He also made sure to blend into the shadows that were there before quickly washing away his hair color, placing his hair back to the way it usually was, and then getting dressed. Once that was done, he was now moving about the city, and had to deal with a few other problems as well. There had been some muggings that he broke up, some thieves trying to steal jewelry and other things of value, a few carjacking attempts, a few drug trafficking attempts, and a few serious street fights. None of them were in the same league as the things he had dealt with in his younger days, but they happened quite a lot. That was something he had to accept, since Los Angeles was a very large city compared to Konoha and the other cities he had seen his travels, and the police were no doubt working very hard to keep the peace in the city. That was why he did not interfere in some of their actions, unless there was a situation where the police were either unable to help in time due to distance, or were outnumbered and unable to handle the situation. He had to give them credit for taking such risks in their professions, as he had read about them in the internet on his travels in the city, and while there were those among them who used their position and authority for their own ends, the rest were good men and women. Naruto got up and headed to the refrigerator and took out some ramen, and after taking the time to heat them, he also decided to grab some fruit and a good drink of cool and still very much fresh milk as well, some of the things he had managed to get before his outing. Finding a supermarket a fair distance from his new place once he settled in. As he ate his food, he began to think about the other aspects of his time in this world. His time as Hokage had helped him see that he was still in a very unique situation. One concern was the fact that he was indeed an unknown person in this world he was in. There was no doubt in his mind that none of the things he knew were going to be found here, so he should not bother in trying to find them. This world would no doubt begin to question who he was, and sooner or later, there were going to be people who would try to find out more about him. Back in Konoha before he became Hokage, he knew that he had the registered paperwork as a citizen and ninja of Konoha, as well as a member of the ninja army of the Land of Fire. And when he became Hokage, he had dealt with a few instances where he had to fill in citizenship registration papers for a number of reasons, namely when his children were born. Here, he had none of that. He did not have medical records, no birth certificate, no nothing. And if there was one thing he learned well, it was the lack of these things that instantly sent warning signals to people in government. He should know, since when he had looked through the files after the war, he found out about Kabuto's own files, when he was taken in by a Konoha medic nin, when he was found in a battlefield so long ago. That was why he had little problem entering Konoha in the past, since he had already files on hand to show that he was a citizen of Konoha through adoption. He needed to address this soon as his second concern was involving his own living space. Not many people wanted to live here, and thus, there was a chance that someone was going to be rather curious why he would willingly live there. Staying in the apartment might give him a place to rest, recover, and whatnot, but without any records it was going to look very odd. This meant that sooner or later, he would have to find himself a place to live that would be off the grid, but still keep him close to the city if he needed to be. Another concern was money. He had thought of it before, but he had a lot of things on his mind at the time. Winning a lottery was one thing due to his rather potent luck that Tsunade and even his wives had said was like the luck of the kami, but this was a completely different matter entirely. Winning a large amount of money was no doubt going to get attention from people, and there was no telling if they were people that did not have bad intentions. In Konoha, his winning of the lottery was not too much of a concern. Here it might be. He however still needed money in order to buy the things he needed, and as such, he needed to have a source of income. Hiring himself out as a ninja was a viable option, but he was not sure if it was a good option. There were no doubt other people who hired themselves out for legitimate and less than legitimate work and get paid for it. These people no doubt would have no desire for heavy competition, and there was no doubt that they would try and deal with him. And while he could be an assassin, he had not killed anyone just for money alone. When he finally killed both Kabuto and Madara, he had been paid handsomely, but these men were totally irredeemable, and had to be taken out as soon as possible, and money was the last thing on his mind. He had a huge amount of Ryo, but he knew that the currency in his world was not going to be acceptable, so he needed money that was native to this world. He thought it over more and more, and it was not long before he hatched up a solution, and just as he was about to do it, he got a call from none other than his former resident, the Kyuubi. What the heck is cooking up in that mind of yours again, Brad? It's been a while, Furball. How have you been? Naruto heard the Kyuubi growl darkly at that, and the demon fox who had been his resident for years, respond to that. If it wasn't for the facts that I can't kill you since you and I are still tied to live together, I am no longer as powerful as I once was, and the fact that I finally developed a real respect for you, I would eat you alive and piss on your remains after I take over your body. But you're not going to do either, right? Don't get snide with me, Brad. You and I might be on much better terms than when you were still a shrimp, and when you finally grew up, but we are hardly going to be full-time friends. You and I are allies of convenience and nothing more. Naruto snickered at that, as he knew that to some degree, the Kyuubi was right. Even after their time together, his control over the Kyuubi's chakra, and to the Kyuubi's grudging respect, the defeat of Madara and his allies as well as Sasuke, they were hardly good friends. He had taken the Kyuubi's hatred in the past, and eventually they became respectful to one another, but they were not like Harabi and his own Bijuru. He still kept the Kyuubi sealed away, and he knew that if given even a sliver of chance, the Kyuubi would try to take over his body and use it for its own needs. Maybe we are, but you have to admit that we did a lot better working side by side than going after each other by the throat. I did help you gain your desire for revenge against Madara for the crap he pulled on you after all. You're fine, and at least you are no longer a weak container like before. I swear, every time I think about how you used to be, it makes my stomach groan, and my teeth ache. And at least I finally got to see you get laid and married to worthy mates. Shame they're gone, but at least those were good times. Naruto frowned at that and replied. Have you been peering into my memories again? It's a habit since there's nothing to do while you are in control, and besides, I only get to go out when there is a need for it, so what is on your mind anyway? You've been making a racket for a while now and I am getting annoyed by it. Just thinking about what we need to do. Aha, just the regular boring stuff again. You know, I hate to say this, but I long for the good old days. Oh? You mean the days when we were dodging away for our lives, fighting Akatsuki and Madara, as well as what was left of his plans, and also the deceased Jinchuriki that Manika of Inut brought back to life, as well as that army of cloned creeps named Zetsu. If I were to recall, you were always telling me not to be so reckless with our lives. Since when do you want those days back all of a sudden? At least those old days were not boring, Brad. All we've been doing so far is foiling robberies and the like, pure crap assignments, if you want to hear me comment about it, though at least this world we're in has promise, and I'm not going to be dealing with those blasted Uchiha again. So what is going on right now in this place you call your brain? Tell me now so I can get some blasted sleep already. Naruto told the Kyuubi, and after a while, the Kyuubi replied. So that's the reason you've been making such a mental racket. Please, you've done worse before. Living on the move in this city should be enough. Stay in one place and then move around, and doing odd jobs here and there should cover it. Easy for you to say. You don't have a lot to deal with in your own mind, and stop peering into my memories, Kyuubi, or else I am going to tighten that cage again. Ha! At least you've grown a very good pair. Tell you what, why don't we go and get drunk and have a lot of fun? From what I have seen, this city's got some interesting stuff to look at and experience, especially the female company. Oh sure, go out and get drunk and get laid. That seems to be an answer you would come up. I swear you're like the pervy sage at times. It's a start, and besides, with my healing of you, your bloodline, and that senjutsu you've been working with for decades, you're going to be fine. Haha, we have to worry about how we're going to live here, Kyubi. That stuff can wait. I was thinking of being a sort of traveling writer, might work. And what, pray tell, are you going to be writing about? My travels, people, places I've seen, battles I've fought in, that sort of thing. I might even try my hand at doing those novels, the pervy sage cooked up here in this world, like what I did back in the old one. Humph, do what you like, Brad, but I sure as hell hope we get to see some action soon. I am getting really annoyed that we only have to deal with such small fry. If there is nothing else, I am going back to bloody sleep. Night then, furball. Same to you, shrimp. As soon as that conversation was over, Naruto began to think about that idea. Writing was something he had done a lot of times, and he had plenty to write about. He could try it out and at least see if he could earn money out of it. But he still needed some things to do that. He usually relied only on an empty book and his supply of pens and his imagination. But this world had a number of very interesting things that he felt he could use to his advantage. It was going to be something that he was going to have to take in consideration, but for now, a good night's sleep could do him a world of good. After cleaning up the place and making sure to secure his home from anyone who might come in, he got some much needed shut-eye. Tomorrow he was going to do some major shopping and also possibly win some more money in either a few odd jobs or in a lottery, and when that happens, he was going to get to work. 4 weeks later. Jimmy Olsen was usually the kind of guy who was working around the clock in the Daily Planet, namely when it came to pictures and articles that were of great interest, since he wanted to be a photographer, and one of the best in the Daily Planet as well. But right now, he was checking out this recently circulated short novel that was becoming something of a hit with some of the younger members of the newspaper. The young man had to admit as he read the story that it was interesting, and more than once he could not help but shake his head as well as blush. Man, whoever came up with this is either a guy with a very vibrant imagination, or one hell of a pervert. He was so engrossed in reading the book that he was not aware that there were 2 people coming in behind him. Thus it was not surprising that he was surprised when the book was taken from him. Hey. You know better than to be reading on the job, Jimmy. The young man gulped as he recognized the voice as Lois Lane's, and sure enough, he was right as he saw that it was indeed Lois Lane with Clark nearby as well. Sorry about that, I'm just reading this story halfway now. Lois read some of the book's contents, and she raised an eyebrow at this and looked at Jimmy. Where exactly did you get this? I bought it in a bookstore. It was recently released from Los Angeles, and made by a writer there, someone calling himself Sage Thompson or something like that. For a guy who writes stories like that, he's not too bad, though not as good as you, Lois. The dark-haired female reporter shook her head and replied. This guy's different, I'll give him that, but while he might stir a man's ego with some of this, I still don't have a liking for what I have read so far, though he does have a rather extensive imagination. You mind if I take a look at this book, Lois? Lois raised an eyebrow at that and replied. You sure about that idea of reading this book yourself, Smallville? The stuff I just read might not be good to you. Clark smiled a bit and replied. I'll be fine, Lois, I am a full-grown man after all. Clark looked the book over as soon as Lois handed him the book, and when he read some of it, he could not help but raise his own eyebrows. The two waited until he replied, though he could not help but have a slight shaking of the head as he spoke. He's got a vivid imagination, all right, still it's not too bad at least, compared to some of the things I have heard about. Right, anyway, we've got a story to cover, make sure Perry does not see you with this, Jimmy. As the two left, Jimmy took the book and hid it away, and he wondered just who this guy was. He was not very famous and was not that recognized, but the fact that he had this story made and published meant that he had some clout, no matter how small. He then got back to reading and couldn't help but get back into the swing of things. If he ever met this guy, he was going to ask just where all this came from, since despite coming close to being called porn, it had a good story. Unknown to him. Naruto yawned a bit as he headed off the roof of the train he was riding on and was soon in the trees. As soon as he was in the clear, he continued the rest of the trip in his own fashion. His new destination was still a day or so away, but he was going ahead to make sure that he had plenty of time to spare. This place in question was interesting to him, and exploring the outside world was going to be interesting to him. Apart from wearing a new set of clothes, he now had a backpack carrying a laptop, several portable and rechargeable batteries, a wireless internet drive connection device, and a few devices called USBs. These had his files, and after spending a week pouring through computer manuals and practice, he was able to make good use of it. He had won enough money to buy what he felt was a good and durable laptop, and went to get the rest of the devices he now had, and worked on a short story that had him in it, though with a different name, along with his late wife Hinata, who had a different name as well. It was actually based on a mission they did together when they were not yet married and what they did afterwards. He grinned to himself as he recalled how surprised he was when he discovered the wild side of the normally gentle and kind-hearted Hyuga heirs. Hinata was not too wild, but still, it had very interesting results either way. That was his first story, and thankfully it was enough to get him paid a good amount, though the books were limited as he had found a publisher who was willing to take the challenge and accepted the fact that he was a traveling writer. They agreed that he would send them stories via the net when on the move or when he was there in the area, and while it was odd to be sure, he was happy that the man agreed to it anyway. For now he was on his way to see the next city, and had to admit that it had the promise of being entertaining. That place was none other than Metropolis itself. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.